Sandman was a unique opportunity for a CGI. We had to understand how the sand behaved to create Sandman.
Well, I've always loved Sandman. I've been waiting for Sandman to be a villain in one of these movies.
We've loved the visuals and the image of the Sandman, and we're always trying to find an adversary for Spider-Man, you know, who is you know, almost impossible to defeat.
I see it as an honor. Really, these movies stand tall in the pantheon of superhero movies.
Sandman was created first and most importantly by Stan Lee when he wrote the comic books in the 60s.
When I did Sandman, I said to myself, Stan, I think this time you're going too far. Nobody is going to accept somebody who could turn his body into sand and ooze under a door and then make his body so rock hard that he could use his hand like a club and knock a wall over. And now he's starring in a movie, in a Spider-Man movie. I think that's wild.
He was one of the Sinister Six. He's one of the very first villains that appeared in the run. And what was fascinating about him in the comic books is Spider-Man literally couldn't grab onto him. Spider-Man throws a web net on him, he goes through the net. He tries to grab him, he can run, the sand just literally runs through Peter's fingers. Spider-Man has now faced a villain that he can't grab onto.
Tom, when we ran into Tom for the first time, kind of up close, it was in the AFI Award, and Laura and I were looking at him like, Sandman?
Thomas Hayden Church was nominated for something, and he won, and he got up on stage and he cried. And I turned to Avi and I said, could he be the Sandman? And Avi said, yeah. And we brought him in, and Sam met him and loved him, and that was that.
He had this look, and then his voice, and he is very strong. At the same time, he plays great victim.
The role is written amazingly, and Thomas is fantastic in the movie.
A lot of people know me from, you know, being a television actor in the 90s, and I think that I just, you know, it's just the fact that you see a guy that you've probably been familiar with for a long time, and then suddenly, you know, thrown into the frying pan of an action movie. I think a lot of people have been a little bemused by that, you know, that they hired a guy like me to get the crap kicked out of him a lot.
You two take the west side! Tommy, take the east! Where'd he go?
In a classic kind of comic book accident, he gets atomized and he becomes the Sandman.
There is this great internal struggle with a guy like Sandman, and it's a great sort of motif of this guy who's literally continually falling apart. He's like a waterfall of inability to maintain who he is and who he wants to be. But the balance of that is you don't want him to look like he's too fragile and falling apart. You want him to look like he can beat the bejesus out of Spider-Man.
That sort of changing character is an interesting idea. In terms of costume, it's very simple, but we're asked in this department to kind of go beyond that. So we design various stages of it, different scales of it, and I work with wonderful sculptors to create maquettes.
We did my entire body casting. First they powder you down, and then you put it in the box, and then they fill it up with plaster.
A head cast is about, the whole process can take about an hour and a half, but they're actually under alginate and plaster bandage for about 45 minutes.
Every time I go to the wardrobe department, it's startling to see my own polyurethane head, you know, screaming at me.
The maquettes were used as a basis for, you know, even the movement of the characters and stuff. There was discussions as to which weapons he would have, so we sculpted just a maquette of Thomas Hayden Church and then made different versions of weapons that would slide onto that arm, so in a meeting with everybody, they could see the different variations of weapons and kind of decide what they wanted to go with.
Well, I think that works great for this part of the scene. It works just great. When it came time to bring him to the screen, the realization of that, which is really the director and the filmmaker's job, we had to first study sand, because this is the thing that we were going to recreate in the computer.
One of the first things that I did on the movie was work with Sam and Bill Pope, the director of photography, to organize a sand shoot, and it was shooting reference of sand, sand thrown up, thrown against blue screen, over black screen. We got every possible reference we could think of based on what the script said, all the different types of motion of sand that we could imagine needing reference for.
There's actually a lot of different types of sand. And for us on Spider-Man 3, we have something, what we refer to as Arizona sand. And it's not the type of sand that you would find at, you know, like the Santa Monica beach. It's actually quite coarser. There's a lot more, it's almost kind of like in a rocky type material.
Once we had our basic understanding of sand and how to photograph it, then came time for the great technicians over at SPI, under the supervision of Scott Stockdyke and others, to recreate the individual grains of sand in the computer.
Sand, I think, has some unique challenges in that it behaves sometimes like a solid and sometimes like a liquid.
So what you're seeing behind me is actually a fluid simulation or a gas simulation. So everything in the box is actually a gas simulation, and you get a nice turbulent swirl in the motion. But as soon as the particles, the sand particles, leave that box, they start to collide against the ground and bounce against each other.
And although there had been particle animation previous to Spider-Man 3, there had never been anything attempted on the scale, the scope that this project demanded.
I think the biggest thing about sand is just the amount of grains that you have. It's just so many grains. I mean, when we started off, we kind of said, you know what, most software packages can do, 400,000, 500,000, but I mean, we needed to go into the millions and then beyond and beyond and beyond.
So if you see this particular image here, there's no reference for scale or anything. When you look at it, it kind of looks like it might be a typical rock. But this sand grain is actually the size of like a pinhead. And one of our real complications on this is how to get all of these, little pinheads all to mass together to form a human body, which is what our Sandman creature is.
You can't just take those large grains of sand and push them back into the distance and then add a few million more, because it won't fit into the computer. So the hard part has been to go from this detailed model to this single point of color without seeing any of the transitions in between.
Spencer Cook and Sam Рэйми had a lot of input as to what the desire and will of the character was going to be. So we started out with our direction from them, of course. And what we needed to do was look at it from the situation of trying to capture the character that they want and the emotions they want, and balance that with the physical limitations and the physical qualities of sand.
And it's kind of the combination of those two things that makes it a level of difficulty that is, instead of like twice as hard, it's like 4 times as hard.
We're going to a lot of effort to include little bits of or chunks of sand falling off of him as he's developing, and we're putting that into the character animation as a guide to help the effects animators to know when, like when he moves his shoulder, more stuff would come off, and this would have to form a little bit more because he's moving it more. And so that kind of interface for me and for the animators working on that sequence in particular is kind of a new challenge in a way, in incorporating the effects animation into the character animation, because the effects are such an integral part of who this character is.
So from the start, having experience with Alfred Molina on the last show, we knew what it took to make a CG human. So we started that process extremely early as we could.
Upper face, part 1, take 1.
We hadn't done any other aspect of performance, and I hadn't really had the opportunity other than the real kind of thumbnail sketches of who he was going to be with Sam. And then I was having to do things like howl and shriek and and be sad.
A little bit on the lips, not too tight, just press it together just a little bit.
It was painstaking to do the motion capture stuff, but ultimately everybody in the building is working probably 5 times harder than you are. And setting up the cameras and the little CG markers, putting all that stuff on you. I really just participated. It wasn't hard, but it was definitely, there were some long hours spent doing all the CG prep stuff.
Thomas's performance definitely does live in the sand. There's many shots where we actually needed to just line up our cameras and CG body exactly with what he did on set, because we used some of what he did on set.
Sam and I would have meetings and we would sit and watch the animatic sequences, which are, it's almost like rotoscoping animatics, where you can see the dimensionality of the various scenes and what Sam and the rest of the creative core have envisioned.
Basically, we work with a software called Maya, and that is a graphical interface that allows us to manipulate a 3D object that has been modeled to look like the character.
There's the initial animation, of course, and then the simulation of the sand, where you end up with kind of like a wireframe, but we're using little plastic spheres to illustrate the shapes. And then once that is handed off, then we have to start coloring it in. So it can take weeks to months, depending on the complexity of the shot.
Sam really has taken what Sandman can do and increased it by tenfold.
When you do have the Academy Award-winning team of Scott Stockdike and his group over at SPI, you put yourself in the right hands, the right creative hands, and you say, go create. And they did, and we couldn't be happier with the results.
So really it was a step-by-step process, and one that was done with storyboards and animatics, and one that was done with the patience of a great deal of technicians, using both existing technology and applied technology from other sources, being put to use in a new way to achieve the illusion. James Franco came to this film loaded with great ideas that really enhanced his performance and the movie as a whole. He really has a more central role in Spider-Man 3.
Well, at the end of Spider-Man 2, Harry has learned the awful truth about his friend and his father, although maybe doesn't have the full story. He lived his whole life for his father, and so when his father was taken from him, the only thing he had in his life was to avenge his father's death.
Harry's hurting, Harry's damaged, He feels like Spider-Man is the enemy.
With the pressure of this voice in his head, which is in his mind the ghost of his father, he believes he has a duty to kill Spider-Man.
Remember me.
Yes, Father. Norman's not hard on Harry. Norman just wants his son to be a little bit more like him.
As his father's voice is getting through to him and manipulating his actions, Peter Parker's actions as a friend also make it through into Harry's subconscious.
He wants to talk to Harry, but Harry's shutting him out, doesn't want to talk to Peter or see Peter.
I need to talk to you. Explain things.
Tell it to my father.
It's the story of Harry seeking vengeance for his father's death, so it's more of a personal thing than just some supervillain.
He knows he loves his friend, but if he just accepts that and goes with that friendship, he has to accept the fact that he's been loving a evil man and doing this evil man's bidding. And, you know, it's a hard thing to face that, you know, you've been doing wrong after so long.
Harry is the villain who becomes a hero, which is wonderful because we know him so well for so long. We want to see Harry again.
Looks like just in the nick of time.
A couple minutes ago wouldn't have been so bad either.
What are you gonna do?
The theme of Spider-Man 3 of growth, of redemption, and ultimately of learning forgiveness. And it was very important to Sam, and I think when people watch this movie and when they come to the finale, they'll see that shine through. Throughout the comics, there have been different versions of the Green Goblin. He's had different looks, there have been different names. So we really took that liberty, and Sam said, let's not have him put on his father's costume. Let's not put the mask back on. Harry would have something different. Harry would probably take the technology available to him now and make something else.
James Atchison really designed all the costumes for the Spider-Man pictures, but he took a special hand in designing the new Goblin character. Also, James Franco gave us a lot of good input that James Atchison incorporated into his designs.
So this is basically a kind of based on a cross between SWAT and a kind of Black Knight, a knight that has a sense of armored cuirass and helm, but with really rather nasty kind of attributes like blades that come out of his arm and a pretty sophisticated and elaborate snowboard.
He wants to create something that is going to get the job done and just take out Peter Parker.
Soon after you see the appearance of this new villain, the mask retracts and you see Harry. You can see the performance. Harry's not trying to hide his identity from Peter. Harry wants Peter to know, this is what it's come to, and now I'm coming after you.
Listen to me! I didn't kill your father!
There's just a hint on the costume, which is mainly black, of green to kind of associate you with the Green Goblin, but basically he's very much his own man.
These are the mechanics and obviously the mechanical department that are taking care of all the mechanical aspects to the costumes for Spider-Man 3. Bob in the background here is working on a set of the Goblin's blades that'll be worn on his arm.
From the production concepts, we CAD design in the computer the shapes and sizes, and we actually fabricate all that in-house. We do the polishing and sharpening, and then we'll do a final assembly and tuning. James Atchison did a lot of the design work, the actual concepts and the physical look of the pieces. We've been working with him, collaborating back and forth, you know, modifying and refining the designs.
This is the finished fabrication area. This is usually the last stop in the manufacturing process. And as you can see here, Corey is starting with a raw James Franco Goblin mask out of the mold. From there, it'll go to, when he's done doing the fabricating of that and the cleanup work, it'll come over here to where Jamie will be painting the mask. And then when they're done, this will end up being the finished product.
It comes to me this way. We start out with a black base, where this is at right now, and we do a series of overlays with materials. stretch the fabric over it to get the texture of the fabric, and it almost gives it a almost like a Kevlar kind of look to it. If you can see it in the light, you can see the grid that the fabric left on after I painted it. And then we do a series of overlays with other types of materials to get a finished piece.
How do you take that technology that his father developed in #1 and take it to the next level for #3? So now we've got a Goblin glider that's a little bit more sleek, that's a little more agile.
We don't really want to spend much time. It's like old glider, drawing 1, 2, hardware, and the thing. So it'll be pretty tight together.
So this is the new generation glider. It's called the Sky Stick. Here's the older generation. When this flies, all the rotors move. His feet get sucked onto here. It's got a video display. As the engine moves, the direction of the board moves. This is all servo controlled.
It was a matter of just going to different areas, sports, military, everything, and pulling the most useful bits from each.
He can ride it going straight or sideways. He can spin it around. He can use it actually as a hitting weapon too, what Sam calls sky jitsu.
They go from the usual environment that you've seen in Spider-Man 1 and 2, and then enter this alley pretty quickly. And in this alley, we had 13 buildings that we had to capture, so we had to make those 13 buildings look like, you know, many, many hundreds of buildings. And we move buildings around all the time, even off the ground and down underneath the ground, to give the kind of levels and layers that Sam's looking for in the movies.
A lot of the animation that we did was simply about the physical aspects of attack and defense, and then the mechanics of operating the glider, how he leans into a turn and how he changes direction and how he stays balanced on this thing.
This would really push and use all the CG actor technology we developed on Spider-Man 2. It's in some cases harder to integrate live action footage into an all CG environment than just to do it all CG. When you want to steal part of performance, you've got to switch between live action and CG. That's actually harder, but the end results usually look better.
We made 3 different versions of this board. One that rides on a fluid head gimbal and basically moves him in front of a blue screen. We made a lighter weight one, and that is for wire flying. So stunts can take that 60 feet in the air, but it can fly around again very effortlessly. And we made one that can fit in a half pipe on a fluid head so that they can get this kind of motion going forward, sideways, backwards. He's got a lot of fluidity and it looks pretty natural. This is called his ionic sword. It's got electrical current that comes shooting out of here and runs the length of the sword.
We were having the Sky Stick, fires up out of control, so it's flying around the room, knocking down, all this lab equipment. And since the Sky Stick is a CGI element, we're having to create the interaction with computer elements.
And action!
It's very challenging for timing, and you have 7 special effects guys, each in charge of knocking over a table or a console. 4 other guys are blowing up brick columns and exploding lights.
Truthfully, I love it, and I'd love to make 1 million. I don't know if it will happen, but, well, it's not gonna happen. I died. The secret's out, I'm dead, so I'm not gonna make more than 3, but I really have had a blast.
Marvel comic books always had a great bunch of villains to choose from in the Spider-Man universe. So many great Marvel artists and writers had developed these wonderful characters and written stories and had drawn great images to go along with them, that it was a very easy task to pick those wonderful tales and images that we wanted to make this film based upon.
A few months after we got the initial story, the idea came about, let's introduce the symbiote, let's introduce the black suit, and of course that means only one thing, let's introduce Venom.
Hey, Parker. The symbiote is the ultimate story in the comics, and that's Eddie Brock. who becomes Venom.
Venom has a very unique origin story. How do we tell that story and do justice to that character who's arguably the most popular Marvel character of all time?
Venom is pure, gleeful, delicious evil.
I always think with great power comes great fun.
You know, we didn't want to spend a lot of the movie explaining its origins or where it came from, so it came from outer space. You know, that seemed like that was true to the comics without all the astronaut stuff.
The symbiote famously first appeared in the Secret Wars in the Spider-Man comics. And in the comics, it's really usually seen as a slightly expanding, black, oily type substance.
You know, when you make a movie, you can't do exactly with something that looks good in a comic book doesn't necessarily look good on film.
We wanted it to seem like an alien thing, to move in a way that we hadn't seen quite before, but something that wasn't in defiance of its liquid form.
When you look at it in the final version of Spider-Man 3, you're going to see something that's much more alive, that has many more tentacles and pieces to it. And a lot of that came from our illustrator, EJ, who just took that initial concept of the goo and said, okay, how can we push this further?
I mean, the goo was kind of a major thing, you know, and that's a perfect example of how in comics the goo works. But in the real world, you got to feel that it's different and it's a little more vicious.
When we first approached the symbiote alien, everybody brought something to the table in terms of designs and artwork and sculptures even, and jars of different kinds of goo, and we'd take tongue depressors and lift them out and look at them.
It took us quite a bit of time to kind of figure out what goo should look like. And the interesting thing about this movie, just figuring out what goo looks like is not going to cut it. We also needed to figure out how goo moves.
We didn't want it to have a structure like an exoskeleton or bones or anything like that, an internal structure, and yet it had to have form and it had to have movement. So we had to come up with a way to animate it and make it move that satisfied us and that didn't defy its very liquid nature.
So how do you take essentially a black puddle and make it aggressive and make it frightening and bring it to life?
There was an animation of goo crawling on Spidey's arm that was based on one of our concept artists, EJ. He came up with a really beautiful, intricate artwork, and the animators kind of took it to heart and really replicated almost by keyframe. And once we nailed that, everybody kind of collectively just said, hey, this is it. I think across the board, everybody found something in there that was menacing and predator-like enough, but not passive.
It's been a real challenge. The goo has been just in that it's unlike any kind of character personally I've ever worked on, and it's just that in that it doesn't have a shape, and so often we associate the shape of a character with that character. You know, we talk a lot about animals, you know, as far as like cobras, the way they kind of rear up and strike, or scorpion stings, or snakes, how they slither, and we look to the animal kingdom, I think, a little bit there. And believe me, I think every one of the artists around here has a stack of comic books where we're constantly just on our own, just thumbing through and looking to like what the different artists throughout Marvel's history have done.
Venom is a character that most excited us because it is a character that has its origins with Peter. When Peter puts this symbiote on, it begins to take on the imprint and the abilities of Spider-Man.
Once it attaches itself to you, it enhances those kind of more negative or darker qualities of somebody's character.
So yes, it's Spider-Man. He's our hero, but our hero now is being tested.
That black substance is drawn to negativity. And I think when it senses Peter's darkness, his hatred for Flint Marko, his terrible sense of guilt, and his pride, it, like a beacon, brings the stuff toward him.
Sam always saw it as kind of comparable to alcoholism or drug addiction or something, because the black suit gets on him and makes him feel powerful.
What is this? I feel... Wow. This feels good.
We are actually using the same fabric. We're dyeing it a different color. We're changing the color of the highlights on it. We're changing the eyes slightly. And we're coating it with a printed grid, which is printed in plastisol, which we're able to screen print onto the suit. And the grid system that you may be aware of from the first suit now is printed in a kind of black sheen.
Black suited Spidey is much more aggressive, and he's much stronger, and he's more brutal. We tried to convey that part of his personality in the motion by having him move a little quicker here and there, hunch his shoulders a little bit more. So this is what we call animation sweatbox, and all of the animators gather in here and we talk about our shots. And right now we're looking at one of the shots from Peter Giliberti. You know, we still want to show the twist. So this moment where he's pulling on the web is a really good moment to initiate that turn, I think.
I can make that more forceful, I guess, by speeding it up and twirling him a little bit faster.
That would be great, yeah. And then we can kick the legs out straighter, too. There's a bunch of shots in the subway sequence when he's fighting with Flint Marko where he'll do things in a sort of a rougher way.
Peter just starts out and ends up railroading over the top of him with his newfound powers. And railroading being kind of appropriate because they're fighting between trains. They're falling about 300 feet through the air between train tracks, and all the time Peter is unleashing for the death of his uncle.
When he finally has to make a decision to get rid of it, it's hard for him.
In the bell tower sequence, I think that it's a really critical story point, and then that Peter's finally getting rid of his burden and getting rid of the goo, and it's being transferred to Eddie, who soaks it up.
And when it's leaving Peter Parker and the bell's chiming, we wanted to show it in a weakened state, and it's shriveling and it's oozing away and slinking away. And the shots at the end where it's actually found Topher found a new host, it gets revitalized and it's attacking and its energy's back, and we tried to give it a little more aggression as it's found its new its new body.
This is an example of some of what animation does and kind of how we get data from animation to effects. Well, the different colors here help us identify which pieces go with which data sets, and then we can call out where we want to add more detail. We can call out where we want to add surface properties or whatnot.
There's a little bit of a cheat. Of course, Topher Grace did not actually swallow the camera when they shot this on set.
Filming the scene where this black tar-like goo was dripping all over me, and I had wires attached to my face that people on fishing poles were pulling up, and then people below me pulling my face down. I mean, when you see that I'm in pain, I mean, I'm like, not a lot of acting required that day.
We had asked Topher Grace to come in and talk about the role, and he was what was written.
I was so honored when I was called to just meet with them, let alone, you know, I mean, it was a great day sitting in that office and to have Sam Raimi tell me, I didn't know why, he was telling me the whole plot of Spider-Man 3. He's gonna jump in at some point and tell me why I was there.
He's fun and scary, and he's just another great addition to the ensemble.
The reason we go with Venom, because we show you what happens if the symbiote gets attached to someone that is truly evil, that doesn't have the character of Peter.
Venom basically has similar strengths as Spider-Man, but just stronger, more agile, more vicious.
It's a little bit, anything you can do, I can do better.
Well, just like Sandman appears in so many different forms in the movie, our Venom also kind of has these different phases of him too.
I just got this image in my mind of, you know, these things just, you know, literally pulling his eyes open. And so those drawings really sparked a resonance in Sam, then led to the idea, okay, well, how is this guy constructed?
What Sam still wanted was Eddie Brock inside that suit. He didn't, you know, he wants his actor.
My specialty is to really ground a design or an illustration in something that could work in the real world. You have seams, you have things that need to be covered, and the webbing just kind of came out, and then it became this whole thing. Oh yeah, this could be, you know, what if the webbing was very vicious? What if it looked like it was gripping him? What if you really felt the pain of this thing on him?
It becomes very much almost an organic structural element within the suit.
To get into, if I'm doing the makeup for Venom, it's about an hour to get into just the suit.
He would first sit in the makeup chair and put on the appliance pieces onto his face. It was a 4-hour process.
It's kind of a tough portal to go through, but once you're on the other side, you can really have a lot of fun.
Oh, you're being filmed. That's why you're so charming.
That's not, oh, please, I'm a very no.
I'm joking. I was even fixing his Venom. I was like makeup art, because we were high up, so I had to fix his little, whatever these things are called, the webbing that crawls up his neck.
There's four versions. There's the makeup that Topher will wear, where you still see a lot of Topher for the dialogue scenes. There's a closed mouth Venom. There's an open mouth Venom, both of which are worn by stunt guys.
There's also a CGI double too, for when, you know, that does something that no human can do. But to me, the best part of the whole experience was they were scanning my body and they said, you know, this will be great because we can use this for your action figure. And I went like, action figure? It hadn't even occurred to me. And then when we were doing the motion capture, you know, that took a good 2 hours to put 1,000 dots on my face.
The scope in terms of visual effects with Venom, all spectacular.
Never wound what you can't kill.
By the very end, by the time that it's the final battle between Peter and Venom, he turns into what we've called comic book Venom, because it's based on the most like crazy designs you saw in the comic book, where everything is just alive and squirming around. It's like an effect extravaganza, basically.
This black substance is really a metaphor for the darkness that comes over Peter's heart.
All the darkness that's in all of us, I think that black suit really just brings that to the forefront.
The person I really want to please is me, because I read these comic books.
Venom is our interpretation of the comic book, and I think the fans will be happy.
Bring the war back up.
good one.
This is the scene where we meet Gwen Stacy, this beautiful high fashion model who's on a commercial shoot for, oddly enough, copiers.
Okay, Gwen, I've got a secret. It's my copier. What is that thing doing in my background?
There's been a construction crane accident that takes place across the street from her location, and a giant girder slams through the office floor that she's working on.
Crashes into the building and almost demolishes everything, leaving Gwen Stacy plummeting outside of the building to be saved by Spider-Man.
What happens is that an I-beam from a crane comes through and takes out all the windows. That's the first step.
3, 2, 1, go! 3, 2, 1, go!
And then the second phase is the crane comes through, the crane arm comes through and takes out the second floor. That the I-beam has gone through the first floor, or we'll call it floor 80, and now the crane has gone through floor 79 and dropped that whole floor, which in reality is just all steel and styrofoam, held up by hydraulics. Before we decide on the angle that we're going to settle on, a lot of things are taken into consideration. We start with the height of the stage and see what we can get in that room. And then we know that our actress will have to be hanging over the side of the building. We'll have to shoot an up angle, so we have to take that into consideration. So we subtract those pieces from the height of the grid and the stage, and then we know our maximum angle. Now in this case, it was about 30 degrees. So then we'll test different things. We'll test chairs rolling down. We test the actress rolling down to make sure that 30 degrees is adequate.
Well, the real goal of the timing of the chairs is this. We want to be with chairs alongside her. She stops and we follow them over. That's really the idea. So I need a retiming of the mechanical effects team. You know,
they were supposed to go over the edge in 16 feet. That one got hung up on something.
Okay. Try and let them go all the way down to the black if you can. For that sequence, I think the most important person was John Fraser. John really designed this giant hydraulic floor that gave way.
What we're going to do right now is we'll just go inside and I'll show you what we call hydraulic hell. What we refer to this as is a gimbal. And a gimbal is anything that can rock and roll like this on different axes. What we have to do is we have to control that, and then we're able to set the floor at different angles depending on what they want the actress to do. We have to drop that floor in a second and a half. That means that all the hydraulic fluid that are in these big rams up here has to leave in a hurry.
Ready, and action!
We had 55 people for 3 weeks. This was all done in 3 weeks. We engineer it, we'll talk it over, see what's best for this shot, make sure that everything is not going to bend and tweak, and then we bring in our welding crew, and 3 weeks later, you're looking at one of the larger gimbals that we've made. There's 1,000 feet of 2-inch diameter hydraulic hose. In a normal theme park ride where it just kind of moves back and forth for any ride, this is 10 times the power required to move all this fluid at one time.
Bryce was a real go-getter. She was willing to be put into these very, very dynamic stunt situations and didn't complain once. I had a great second unit director in Dan Bradley who helped me, and a great stunt coordinator, Scott Rogers, who really rigged up all these stunts with Bryce.
It's amazing. We have, Bryce out there on a little wire and it's like, okay, run toward us and we're gonna drop the floor before you make it to safety. And she was like, okay.
What's so great about movies is you get to really experience these crazy, crazy incidents, like accidents. You know that you'll be 100% safe because Sam in particular, he's very cautious with his actors and he really protects them.
The whole sequence is really about putting her in peril, so you have to put her in peril. The floor drops and she has to hit the ground and then she starts sliding and then she has to actually slide over an edge. Well, there's really no way to fake that. If you just hang on a wire, it looks like you're hanging on a wire. So she has to kind of hold herself a little bit, and she took it. I mean, the more we dished out, the more she took, and you know, she didn't cry about any of it.
At this point, it only drops maybe that far.
Right.
So obviously out there, it drops. As you run forward, go ahead and come forward. I'm just doing that. I won't even pull you, I'm just keeping the slack. And if for any reason it was to fall, I just got hold of you. You can't go.
The best part for me was when they like pulled away the floor and I was running and there's an expression on my face where I'm just kind of like, ah, because the floor just totally came out from under me.
Bryce is just a total gamer. She just, whatever you wanted her to do, hang from a building, slide down a tilted floor, whatever. She was just spectacular. She's a great trooper.
I try to do as many things as possible because it's really fun.
She did a really great job, and any time that an actress can do that for us, it just makes the scene a lot better because it doesn't tie the director down to shooting over their back. You know, we're looking right at Bryce going down that floor, and it's really dramatic, great shot. She just did a great job.
We did a shot on 2 with Spider-Man swinging in with Aunt May. Well, on this one, we were doing basically the same thing with Gwen Stacy. This is round 2, we got to do it bigger, and Sam wanted to do it a lot higher. And so I came to Bryce, I said, hey, how high are you willing to hang up in the air? We can swing you from as high as you're willing to go. I think we swung her from 50 or 60 feet up, you know, and she didn't complain. She, in fact, you know, at the end, she, you know, really enjoyed it, and, you know, it was quite a rush.
I mean, like that feeling, that rush of adrenaline, like you really cannot get unless you're doing some kind of extreme sport. I mean, it's incredible.
With a gag like this, we'd love to do all that in New York City live, but that's not going to happen. We're not going to take any buildings down. So what we do is we go to New York City and we get all the extras on the streets, and then we drop stuff from about 50 feet. We made rubber television sets, we made rubber desks, we made rubber chairs, breakaway glass, rubber glass, everything we could think of that we could drop on the street and have people running around. Taxi cabs flipping over and that sort of thing. Now we have that in the can, as they say. Now we're going to duplicate it once again. What happens is that on a scene like that, they'll put everything together. They'll put our stuff together from the stage. They'll take the New York stuff, and they go, is there anything missing in between? And yeah, there's about 5 minutes of the scene missing. Well, that 5 minutes of the scene will generally be a quarter scale model of that whole, of the building, of the crane, and that ties it all together because there's no way that you can do all of that. And so we bring in the modeling team.
Today we're taking a 6-scale building and we're running a modeled version of the crane through a floor of the building. This shot was built from scratch. There was none of these components existed 4 weeks ago. The model was scaled to that plate that they actually shot in New York. So when they take these 2 buildings, they can composite them and line them up. But for this shot today, it's there's two cameras that we're concentrating on. One is one high camera looking down on the building, and the other one is chasing the crane into the building. We speed the film up to slow down the screen time. Slowing down the screen time gives the illusion of larger components. Being that the model is scaled smaller, in reality, gravity and various other elements in our environment react the same. They don't care about scale. For instance, debris or dust. If it's large and it's far away, you expect it to move a lot slower. This is one of the reasons why we speed the film up, so when you see it on screen, everything looks like it's slower, heavier, more mass to it.
Publishing house was a lot of fun, and it took an effort from, let's say, coast to coast to pull this off.
There's a lot of battles in this movie with many different
villains.
We have these really extraordinary action sequences that feel like you would imagine the comic book would be if it came to life.
In the previous films, we saw a lot of Spider-Man battling, but we always lost the main character that we loved, Peter Parker. So I felt it was important in this third film, like in the comic books that I've read, to have Peter be involved in the battles, maybe caught at some moment when he wasn't in his Spidey suit.
This is the biggest roller coaster ride. In movie 2, we had this great train scene.
We thought the train sequence, was just the hugest thing anybody would ever do. But now, of course, we have to top that.
These pictures are made with the help of very good second unit directors and a great stunt coordinator, Scott Rogers, who really rigged up all these stunts.
That's been an immense help. And those guys, they're scientists over there with their stunts. I mean, they've got their Go camera system, which for the first time, they are flying a actor in conjunction with flying the camera.
Dan and I like to, find the edge of what's currently possible. What we thought was the edge a long time ago, we're beyond that now.
We literally sit down and on a weekly basis put together rigs that I've never seen. And that's the challenge, is that we're constantly on the very cutting edge of stunts and stunt technology, just trying to impress ourselves.
My responsibility, along with Dan Bradley, is to basically organize and coordinate the stunt team and help design the way we're going to do certain stunts.
It's a wholly encompassing occupation. It tests your physical abilities, your mental abilities to figure out how to do things, and frankly, your emotional battle with fear.
The stunts on Spider-Man are a little more unique because, because of the superhero nature and everything's stronger and more powerful. And your limits of reality are so far beyond, a traditional movie.
What is very exciting to watch are these characters interacting in a different way. Watching Tobey perform Spider-Man feats as Peter Parker.
Tobey did a lot of stunts in this picture. In this way, we could always see this great actor's face, Tobey Maguire, and be in the midst of these battles, and I thought it would give it a different flavor.
At the end of the day, you still want to be with Tobey's face. You want to be with Peter Parker as he's experiencing these events, as he's going through these battles.
I'm out there quite a bit. We're always trying to take Spidey's mask off. And I just think if you disconnect for too long by putting masks on these characters, that it kind of hurts the connection. It hurts the moviegoer's experience.
This is my third picture with Tobey, and it's sort of like, the old pro comes back in and he's doing some great stuff, and James and he really, got to it. They did virtually all their own stuff.
In this movie, we're really fulfilling a goal that Sam had from the very beginning of the series, to have more action take place high above the street. So there's a big chase fight sequence, but it's Peter as Peter and Harry up in the sky.
This particular battle that takes place between James Franco and Peter Parker is really the story of friends turned against one another. It really isn't the story of the New Goblin versus Spider-Man, so I thought it most appropriate that we could see their faces.
There's a great kind of air joust, and since the first one, Sam and everyone is really advanced with the aerial photography and everything, so just they were ready for a real air battle like they hadn't done before.
James is, really athletic, really controlled and aware and fantastic in a fight scene.
The big challenge is, there's so much of the work is aerial, and, Sam wanted to take the masks off. So suddenly we're dealing with, very complicated, very tough aerial shots where, we're seeing the actors.
In order to do most of those things, you need wires to do it. So, 90% of the stunts on Spider-Man incorporate a wire of some sort.
The more we shot, the more I got really excited about actually really using Tobey and using Tobey's face and the real actor instead of CG. And what's interesting is that I worked closer with the stunt people on this show than I did on the last show. And they actually made huge improvements, and they set up almost a motion control system for their stunt people in terms of they had wires that were computer controlled.
We've developed a flying system, the computer controlled winches, and we're doing things that have never been done before.
It gave us the ability to not just fly a body through a space, but to manipulate it at the same time.
We have up to 10 high-powered winches that we can attach to people and work up to 60 different axes, and very often we'll have 3 or 4 winches attached to one performer to move them at great velocity through any space.
All a winch does is take line in and let line out. What's special about these is that they take them into a really strict precision level, decimals of an inch, if we want to set, to go that close. And they all talk to one another, so if you have multiple devices working in a gag and one for some reason might be out of position, the other one knows it's out of position and they'll either compensate or they'll shut themselves down, so you avoid a collision or something of that nature.
When we're doing wire work and things, every human being on Earth will fly slightly differently, so it's like what you may envision and actually rehearse with a stuntman or a stunt double will change when you hook up the actor sometimes.
We go through a discovery process. We figure it out from an engineering point of view. We put it in, we work it, we make changes, and then we lock a profile that works for that particular shot.
Tonight's the night of the big explosion. We're doing a bunch of wire camera work, and we're doing some stunt work here. Peter's thrown a razor bat back towards Harry, and it explodes, so we're going to do a huge practical explosion. Harry's going to come flying through that fireball, partly on fire himself, just straight towards camera. Dan Bradley and Scott Rogers, the stunt team guys, they know how to make this safe, so they're gonna make sure it's safe for the stunt guy, fly him through, and in the end we'll probably have to do a face replacement, put James Franco's face on there, because realistically he couldn't do that stunt. Today we're on stage 29 at Sony, shooting a fireball element with a stunt guy going through it that we were going to be shooting in downtown LA, but we kind of ran out of time before they let us shoot before midnight there. So we decided to pick it up on stage. Would have rather had it on location, but this shooting on stage gives us a little bit more flexibility. We have more time to get extra bonus elements.
At the end of the Peter Goblin fight, Peter's 65 feet up in the air on the side of a building. He's clotheslined Harry off the board, and he realizes thinks he's just killed his friend. We do a live shot of the double, 65 feet in the air, in which it looks like he leaps off the ground, free falls, and then right before he hits the ground, he webs up and slows down and lands in a pose. Just to do that drop, we used 3 winches that translates his weight, so he actually alters where he's hanging from, and we hit free fall, so all the clothes and everything, and it drops right to the ground.
3, 2, 1, go!
Even Tobey, as soon as we shot it, he looked at me and he goes, "That may be the best stunt of all these movies." Well, we're downtown, it's supposed to be New York. The Sandman goes into the sand truck that has, yards of sand, gathers it all up, and blows out of it and heads down the street as a giant sandstorm, and taking with it people and cars and all kinds of objects. So this shot will have the stuntman flying away from the camera, and then the camera moves down the street and follows the action as the cars blow and the people run, and it's a timing issue. Everything has to hit on an exact mark and an exact time, so each car reacts right after the other. Well, Grant's the guard in the back of the armored car, and the guard gets He's the one that catches the brunt of the Sandman's wrath. And so he kind of, you know, gets hammered down in the fist and hits the ground, and then he gets buried in sand for a little while.
Yeah, we're resetting.
I think I just soiled myself. I was standing there and a 600-pound sand fist came crashing through the roof, and I dived out of the way just in time, thank goodness. I didn't know it was going to come that low. That was a little scary, but the sound, there's not much acting in there. The sound really, you're jumping out of the way naturally.
Grant, well, I think he was perfectly cast. He's an armored car guard, and his job is to guard the money. And being a producer, he's uniquely qualified for guarding the money. So Sam has typecast him and invited him to spend a lot of time on sec unit getting buried underneath tons of sand.
If you just, on this box, do this, come here, and just let yourself kind of fling across frame.
Yeah. We're here on stage 24, getting ready to do another stunt. I've got a harness on. It's a little tight. It's meant to be tight and snug, but when you're already a little nervous and it's already a little bit tighter, it just makes it that much more difficult, but it's all safety.
Grant's great. I mean, he has a great attitude, and he literally got buried in, sand. So, that's a little unnerving at some point.
Sand is actually ground up corn they're gonna dump on me. I think there's 3,000 pounds worth, but we'll see. We'll see. Piece of cake.
And 3, 2, 1, go!
There you go, just like that, keep going more.
It wasn't bad until that you felt the pressure going up and still trying to scream as there's all the dust was in the air and just waiting for it to overtake your head. All I really had to do was stand up, but I think it was 3,000 pounds that dumped on it. And after a while, it gets a little difficult to push out.
I think next to our superhero, he's probably the one that gets beat up the most in the film.
She doesn't know what you are.
Peter, she knows me very well. And when she kissed me, it was just like she used to kiss me. That taste. Strawberries.
The fight between Harry and I in the Osborn mansion is a great fight because it's two guys who love each other like brothers with a lot of history of hurting each other, and it gets pretty nasty.
So you take two superpowers, but they're still friends and their emotions are raw, and I think they were trying to get, away from the big fantastic, which is the majority of the other film, and this was a different sequence on another level, and almost more personable, more real, and just grittier.
We actually developed a style with the actors and really talking about it on an emotional level. And Tobey would respond and go, I think my character would do this. I don't think my character would do that. And James is the same way. So it's like sort of really hand in hand we came upon the choreography that felt real and true to these characters.
An air ramp's actually a very old piece of equipment. You step on it, throws you through the air. So we see when Peter throws Harry, the double steps on it, goes flying through the air. So you see him, and he hits a balcony and goes flipping over. And so we cut the floor out and filled it with a foam, and and he hits himself in endos and does a 3/4. And if the floor was there, he would have landed on his head. Cut the floor away, put the pad there, and he enables the stuntman to actually land on his head and not get hurt.
Ready and action.
We're here in Culver City at Sony Studios on stage 30, shooting some work on our motion base today. Ready and action. Basically, we can put our taxi there and maneuver it about 22 degrees in any direction, so we can, in a safe environment, be able to have actress in the car manipulating it in all kinds of ways that we couldn't do on the street. If ever we need to have the taxi at more than a 22-degree angle, we actually can go on this. Basically, it can go 360 degrees, depending on how and where the car is rigged. And like as I said, it does actually go 360 degrees, and our fearless MJ tested that rig out herself.
Ready and action.
It wasn't really scary, it was more nauseating is when they turned the taxi around. Like, it was okay going forward, but the reset was like your stomach just fell, you know, to your throat, and that was not fun.
She's a trooper. She's doing a lot of this stunt work, things that we could do with a stunt double. She's been doing them all and doing a great job.
One of the best stunts that I think we did in the final battle is when Harry comes in and he hits Venom, and Venom goes flying through the walls. And we did all in one shot. We used 2 Venoms, which is the beauty of having that suit, is we fly him through and we rotate him as he hits this one thing and this breakaway table or a rack, and he flips up and he smashes into this wall face first. And then as we pan with him, another Venom that's hidden just behind the wall blasts out of the wall, you know, doing what we call a twisty ratchet, which is a single line, flipping him, landing him on the ground, and rolls him out.
3, 2, 1, go!
Getting a great shot is a result of doing our homework and planning it well and executing it well. But there isn't a shot out there worth getting anybody hurt over.
I have tremendous amount of trust in our stunt team, and have to, because really if somebody makes the wrong kind of mistake, I could die. I mean, really, I'm not saying that I ever feel like I'm in that kind of jeopardy, but if somebody did the wrong thing, it is a possibility. It's weird though sometimes when you're on a harness and you're 50 feet above the ground and you're like, wow, like if somehow this computer-operated machine had some kind of weird glitch and decided to drop me, that would be really a disaster, you know?
The most important part is obviously safety, but without compromising safety, to bring a level of intensity.
You know, I want them to know that they're safe, but I also kind of want them to not feel like they're safe necessarily. Because as a director, I'd like to go ahead and capture that energy.
And you know, we're always trying to, I think, out of, you know, ego or anything else, we're always trying to better ourselves, you know, and take it the next step.
And so we never like to repeat ourselves. We are always pushing for something we've never seen before.
To meet the level of audience expectation, you need to shake it up and break it up to bring about these fantastic sights to thrill the audience.
I get to tell people to do all the things I dreamed about when I was 7 years old. It's like, you know, I love car crashes, I love watching fights and movies, and it's like, now I'm doing it. There were shots that I set up I did when I was, 10 with my Matchbox cars. And now they're real-size cars, and the cops are holding traffic for me. It's fantastic.
One of the really interesting parts of Stan Lee's comic books was always that Peter Parker and Harry Osborn both liked Mary Jane Watson, and that Gwen and Mary Jane were both rivals for Peter's love. I really wanted to bring that dynamic to the screen.
Mary Jane and Harry come together when they both need each other.
That further complicates hers and Peter's relationship and his relationship with Harry as well.
Gwen Stacy is part of a love triangle with Mary Jane and Peter Parker and Eddie Brock, actually.
There's like a love octagon. The interconnectivity of all these characters is something I always love.
There's some really great fresh stuff in the love triangle. There's so many twists and turns.
Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson are closer than they've ever been before. She's aware that he's Spider-Man, and now she is trying to live up to the promise that she made at the end of the second film to share the responsibilities of what it means to be this hero.
Tell me you love me.
I love you. I love you so much. I always have. Time has stood still for the young lovers. It's right before, it's like the moment before things are gonna start to get stirred up.
As Peter Parker is starting to become a little bit full of himself as Spider-Man, he's starting to build up a little bit of an emotional wall between Peter Parker and MJ.
Peter's not there as much for her as she'd like him to be, and so she's kind of pushed aside a little bit.
Peter absolutely takes the love of his life for granted because he just believes it's the love of my life. She's my girl, period.
Neither of them is bad or wrong. They're just struggling with things everybody struggles with. They're both right, but they're not in sync.
I'm worried about you.
I'm fine. I don't need your help.
Everybody needs help sometimes, Peter. Even Spider-Man.
We wanted to expand Peter's social standings. And when you look back at the comics, Gwen Stacy, one of his first girlfriends, we thought, wouldn't it be fun to bring Gwen in and have her be a little bit of competition for MJ?
She's kind of like this bright, sunny, happy, uncomplicated girl. Spider-Man saves her life, and she becomes kind of enamored.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
It'll be an interesting flirtation because Gwen Stacy is such a deeply moral character, and she really would know, if she had known that he was involved with Mary Jane, she would have never let him on.
Thank God you're okay.
Daddy!
Hey.
Eddie has imagined an entire life around a date or a couple dates they had, and as he gets more desperate, as more things taken away from him in the movie, he becomes more obsessive about her, and she becomes kind of the answer to him.
What about that amazing night that we had?
We had coffee, Eddie. Eddie has aspirations to be a photographer, and Gwen has aspirations to be a model. Seems like a match made in heaven, but not quite, because he's a psychopath. In the Keys to the City scene, everyone in the crowds, yelling, kiss her, kiss her, kiss her, and what Spider-Man ends up doing is sharing that special kiss from the first film, the upside-down kiss, with this other woman, and it's pretty heartbreaking for Mary Jane.
And yet Peter thinks he's ready to ask MJ to marry him.
And he wants to pop the question, if you will. So he goes to a fancy restaurant, and he wants to do the whole thing with the ring and champagne, so he enlists me, idiot maitre d', to help him.
I have this ring.
Ah. Hello. And of course, it all goes to hell in a handcart.
Things took a turn for the worse when Gwen Stacy showed up.
It's more threatening, I think, to Mary Jane that she actually is a smart, beautiful woman instead of playing a very shallow person.
Gwen Stacy is upper middle class, loving family, opportunities, totally different than Mary Jane. Mary Jane had a complex upbringing and has a complex existence. So it complicates things in a nice way.
MJ gets to a very low and lonely place, and Harry is the one that's kind of there for her as a friend.
He's always loved her, and whatever, he's always had a thing for her.
Yeah, hateful little things.
I love her.
Yeah, me too.
The amnesia was a way to take the friendship back to where it started, and even in the first one, you only get a little taste of what that friendship is. Check this out.
That kitchen scene is really about like the celebration of friends and how they really feel about each other. It's just that all these other things have convoluted their relationships.
We created a bunch of poetry and a couple of screenplays that he had been working on in high school, and that was sort of fun because it saw a side of him that we had never seen before.
I'd love to be in your play.
Cheers.
That relationship is a little entangling and a situation that Mary Jane hadn't planned on.
Mary Jane, please!
Peter believes that Mary Jane has betrayed him with Harry, and he takes Gwen Stacy to the place where Mary Jane is working and uses Gwen to make Mary Jane jealous.
Camera pulls back, revealing you, Tanya.
Peter has used his powers in different ways. Sam thought it would be fun this time to have Peter use these powers for a show-stopping dance number.
Spin, go, there it is!
I lucked out with Tobey Maguire. He is a natural dancing machine. He'll never say that, he won't admit to it, but he is an amazing mover. And the love triangle was, for me, the driving force of this piece. Tobey, immediately when I met with him, committed himself to doing this scene. So he put in some time with rehearsals and was very hands-on in helping to develop the scene as well and what really felt right for him and his character.
The dance number was one of the best times of my entire life. It was so great, and I felt like I was like in some great 1940s musical.
Peter is here with Gwen, but this whole thing is to really get to Mary Jane. And so in the creation of this choreography, I really kept that at the front of my mind.
I realized that this whole production that he's put on was just to hurt me, and he hurts her in the process too.
She isn't a manipulative woman. I mean, when she finds out that he's betrayed Mary Jane, I mean, she is truly apologetic and embarrassed by the situation.
I'm so sorry.
We try to approach it from the most realistic way we can and applying logic and truth to relationship problems between Peter and Harry and Peter and MJ and Harry and all of the characters and all the conflicts mixed in with all of these out of this world things, and I think it's a challenge and it's a lot of fun.
Classically, in the way we've done these movies, there are always complex romantic entanglements.
Still the most important thing in their lives is friendship and trust, and then love will come.
Our story is about characters that get to know each other better, learn to trust each other. Our experiences together mirror some of those experiences of the characters growing together in the film.
And really the joy of having the same actors from movie to movie is you do get to follow the growth of the characters as you follow the growth of the actors.
They're now adults. They have life, they have pain, they have success, they have aspiration. We grow up with them.
You have the sort of blueprint for the movie you're gonna make, and you have the scenes and the conflicts and the dialogue, but then when you get with the other actors and the director and you start to play the scenes, you know, the real relationship starts to form.
It's really been a pleasure to see Kirsten and Tobey and James in the bonds that they've formed with each other. They were all really spectacular actors to start with, and I must say I think each one of them has just gotten better and better.
One of the scenes in the movie is when Spidey and Sandman end up in the bottom of a big water cavern in New York City. Now with Sam Рэйми, the first thing he asks you is, you know, what's the biggest pipe you've ever broke full of water? And then the second thing is double that in size.
Marco's taken some money, and Spider-Man's trying to recover the money, but more importantly, he's trying to put an end to Sandman. So it's a more vicious Spidey than we normally have.
Spidey and Sandman are having this fight about 300 feet above us.
So I can pull him all the way around here.
Good. How do we sell the first front punch from behind? Look what we've got.
I just gotta help it out. I can help it out.
Look.
Yeah,
I just gotta whip it a little more.
And they eventually fall down into this water accumulation area we call the cavern, or the cesspool, depending on what day it is.
Sandman comes in contact with the water, and so this is where we see what Spider-Man sees, which is the first sign of a weakness of the Sandman, where when he gets in contact with water, he starts to turn into mud, and his hand is going to start to dissolve.
All right, let me get you in the down position, please. Let's line you up over the money.
Marco has to crawl out of the sewage dregs of Manhattan.
More realistically, that he's going to take the impact of the fall, recover, start to pick himself up, getting ready for battle, then see the money. So I'm going to say, and money. That's your cue to go.
That night, I looked around the set and everybody's like, "Ooh, man, I sure am glad I'm not church tonight. Look at him." He's soaking wet.
The funny thing, we have Marco in a blue arm. We actually won't be pulling a key off that blue. So it's just more a reminder to the actor that he's got something there. And actors now are pretty savvy and they're used to dealing with blue screen, and it tells them something and it keeps something in their mind.
I'm carried and slammed into the grating and then slowly dissolve. The water pressure was just intense. There was just no way to control it, and there's no way to control what happened.
What Sam wanted is that he needed a way for the Sandman to melt away. So we came up with this idea to put this 6-foot pipe behind us, and Spider-Man would pull back on part of it, and then we would pyrotechnically release the water. What you see behind me way up high is the big dump tanks. 40,000 gallons of water in one shot. And this is the most water dumped on one particular scene. So we're kind of setting a record here. With the 6-foot pipe, there's not enough water in the city to make this gag happen. So what we do is we put in the middle of it what we call a restrictor plate. And we can take the restrictor plates and make them bigger or smaller depending on whether they want the waters to be 3 inches thick or as much as a foot thick. What you don't see here is all the tests that we've done. When we were testing it, of course we tested it at my shop for several weeks and had some great moments with that, knocking down fences, pushing cars around.
Rolling.
When the construction department started erecting the set, we pretty much said, look, this is the forces that we're going to take against your wall, and then they will build it according to our specs.
The pipe just shifts back. How they did with this cable here, lock it into that bracket. We go around it, suck it back to it, and the surge, okay? Because it actually moved a foot back on Saturday. It's amazing how much force is there.
But along with just water breaking out, what we have to do is we have to design that big pipe so it explodes and breaks away and does not hurt anybody. We'll attach cables to all those pieces that are coming apart. That way we know exactly where all those pieces are going. And that's the safety part about it. It looks great, but we know what's going to happen in the end.
People may think of it all being CGI or computer-generated images, but the actual people and the elements are actually human beings performing that action. So we take safety as the utmost priority.
I've asked for a little wire-tie breakaway so it gets hit, then it'll get pushed up, goes up there, and then we hang on to it with a counterweight. So it just floats up there.
We worked real close with the digital effects group so that we're not overlapping, and then we decide through a series of meetings what's best for the shot.
In this case, actually, visual effects in a way takes a back seat. John Fraser and his team set up the whole event, and it's covered with more than 8 cameras actually in this case because there were a couple different takes.
We're going to set everything up just before the water is released, and we'll be staying dry as long as we can.
So let's slide this back on.
I just want to see what we can see as far as the dials.
I can't see the focus at all. I can only see the arrows.
Just the arrows? You can't see the focus at all. Okay.
So we're going to have to set the focus and then close it up.
Yeah. We'll have to know what the focus is exactly. Okay.
Yeah. We got to make sure the focus and iris are set. Keep our fingers crossed and make sure it all goes like we planned.
Put your body on the left side there. Yeah, good.
We're good? Then what we do in visual effects is we know we have to put a CG Sandman in here because the dump is just too big. It's not safe for a stunt guy to go in.
We'll do the big blast, and then we work our way down till we get into a safe level where an actual person could be in it.
A little bit more that way, right there.
And setting,
We take all the safety precautions. We don't want anybody to get hurt. So the biggest thing is that if you're not involved in the shot, you shouldn't be on the set.
Roll cameras, rolling. Stay here. Hey. On my go, and 3, 2, 1, go!
And so all in all, when it's all said and done, you gag like that, you've got 30 guys that have been on that gag for probably 2 months. So when you do it, you really want it to be big. You know, you want to put all the money on the screen.
I started working with Sam in 1989, basically as a production assistant.
Bob is really my very close collaborator in the post-production. He takes all the footage and makes his original cut first. And honestly, there's very little that I usually change about his cut. He really has a very good vision of the picture as it should be. I have a team of great storyboard artists that really help me tell the whole story of the movie. Then I have a team of animatic artists that take my storyboards and work them into a living, moving whole, so I can actually see sequences before I have to shoot them.
I would put together a scene from these animatics, and we would look at it and say, well, here's a scene that has 100 shots. We only have enough money in the budget for 80 shots. So I would try to make cuts and try to make things make sense within the constraints of where we needed to be at. The other part of the animatic was, it was sort of a foundation for starting to build the sequence.
And then I even cut those animatics together so that the second unit director can see what lens I prevised it with, where it starts and where it finishes, and they're very good about bringing me what I needed or something better.
One of the most complicated sequences in the movie was the Peter Goblin fight. The idea is that Sam wanted to have this incredible aerial battle between the two characters. It was actually the first scene that I came on to start working on. And I got the scanned versions of the storyboards and I started putting them together, which looked something like this, kind of giving a rough idea of what the action would be. Then some of the shots were in a more progressed state, where they were sort of computer generated. As I started getting the footage, I would actually start incorporating some of the live action footage into the animatic. Sometimes the animated scenes were a guide for scenes that would be shot using the actual actors, and then sometimes they were a guide for the animators at Sony ImageWorks to actually create them in the virtual world of CGI.
Bob Murawski would cut the sequences together, but background plates and things of that nature have to be put in so we get a continuity of what's coming and what's going building-wise. That's pretty much the key, in my opinion, to getting it to look real.
The movement is so complex. He has to shoot, he has to take the web, and the web has to take his weight. He has to pull himself on the web, and the body does different things. The trick was also to manipulate the background so it matched the movement of the actor, to really sell the idea that he was, shooting webs and flying between these buildings. I mean, for me, the biggest thing and the biggest challenge was dealing with footage from all the different units coming in, because not only was first unit shooting, which directed by Sam, but there were also a variety of second units, third units sometimes. You just deal with it like you would deal with building anything. If you're building a house, you have to build it one brick at a time. I really love every part of the filmmaking process, but the best of all is actually when the shoot starts and getting the material and seeing the footage for the first time and seeing what the actors bring to the material, the performances, how it elevates it to the next level, which is always great.
Listen to me! I didn't kill your father! He was trying to kill me! He killed himself! Shut up!
And then being able to take the footage that they give and working it into creating a scene.
Hate those things.
And the nice thing about the Spider-Man movies is the movies are big, so you actually have a lot of time. So it's nice to be able to actually put something together, step back and look at it in a week or in a month or whatever, and go back and make things better and try to perfect it.
Well, this is such a big picture. There's so much filling the screen visually that we really want to complement it with what happens on the soundtrack.
I've had the wonderful experience with Sam Рэйми on The Gift. And so without seeing a frame of the footage for Spider-Man 3, I already knew kind of what to expect. And so that's one of the things that made me madly want to work with him on Spider-Man 3. His and my worlds are exactly the same. We're cut from the same cloth. I think we have a lot of the same dreams. I've done a lot of creepy movies in the past, and so I kind of felt confident that I could plunge into this world and come out with something that would address the heart of what this picture is all about. What happens is I watch the film a couple of times, once or twice, and then what I normally do is walk around with a picture in my head for a week or so if I've got the time, and just spit into a cassette machine any idea that comes into my head. You know, I'll have it by my side all the time. I'll hum into it, play at the piano into it, and culminate a whole ensemble of thematic ideas. And then I sort of pull the plug on it and go, okay, it's time to face the music or face the movie and see if any of them actually work. One requirement is to be able to think on your feet. I do it because, fortunately, by the time I get on the stage, I get to know what Sam is really, I get to know him well enough so he can talk to me in shorthand.
Yeah, 37, front row play over.
The amazing thing about when you work something out in your mind, ultimately it does affect the music in a positive way because all the ideas have to be organic and you will not allow yourself to put anything on paper that you can't actually hear in your head. And if you work it out successfully in your head, you can be pretty confident that it's going to sound fine on the stage. So when I got on the stage, I knew every single cue intimately because I'd written it and I'd actually worked out the orchestration in my mind. I was responsible for determining what are the flutes doing, what are the woodwinds doing, what are the contrabass saxophones that I had for the Sandman theme, what are they doing?
The hostage has been identified as Mary Jane Watson, an actress recently seen in a brief stint on Broadway.
As it turns out, the theme that I came up with for the black-suited Spider-Man, I mean, it was one of those wonderful moments. It came immediately. I saw the picture, and I think I ran to the piano, and it was the first idea I got. That's surprising, because usually what happens during those periods of thematic gestation is that 99.5% of them never make it into the movie. In this instance, I hit a home run. I'm kind of blessed. I mean, it was just quite a miracle.
I think Chris Young, he's like the Iron Man. He writes action amazing, and he did a fantastic job. So it was actually easy to work with his tracks because they told the story really well all on their own.
No, wait, sir, you don't want to do this.
I'm Kevin O'Connell, and I'm the sound mixer on Spider-Man 3. Sound mixing is where all three elements of the film, the dialogue, music, and sound effects, come together to create the voice of the film. It was great because Sam actually came to us when he was doing the script for Spider-Man 3 and said, hey, I want to put in some cool sound moments in this movie. And he came to us to say, how can we do it, and what should we do, and how can we work it out? And it was great, and it worked out really cool. Paul Otteson, being the supervising sound editor, starts on the film usually a few months before we do. And on this particular case, actually, I think he started about a year before we did.
I work a lot earlier with Sam. It's when they were working on the
the script very early on, and I do go and record a lot of the sounds myself and creatively come up with a concept. Well, I guess this is a tractor trailer.
3-axle tractor.
3-axle, a bunch of horsepower. It looks like it's about 15 years old. Seen better days, but I think this should be good. So we have one mic out kind of where the engine is, and we have one mic in the cabin here. We're gonna see how this works out. A lot of times you don't really know what you're gonna do. You try a couple of things, you got to record this and that, and it creates more ideas, and I really do enjoy that part. That's why I still keep the sound designing part as one of my tasks as well.
Paul created a unique palette of sound for all of the various characters in the film, and it's just like utilizing paint on a canvas. How much you use of each and every element determines the outcome of the piece.
So this is what I work with. It's a Pro Tools, as this program is called. I have my digital picture over here on this side. I can click anywhere on this timeline here, and you will see the movie follows. Then this section here, that's for Sandman. Every little modulation here is something that's been specifically cut for this moment when all these pillars goes by. And each sound, it's about a 15th of a second. And you see over time how all this, the machine is spinning, goes faster and faster. Then if I go down to a different track, there's a different sound. There will just be the motor kind of gaining speed and going faster. That helps out just the sound of the pillars going by. Here we have another sound for these pillars going by. And here's yet another layer of these pillars going by. You layer all this together, you end up with
the birth of Sandman sequence. Sam wanted a continuous growth from that original microscopic sand molecule to continue to grow throughout the sequence.
The sound of sand by itself is like white noise almost. And that is something we try not to have in movies, is these noises. So I went and bought this sugar, salt, rice, little beans, peas, cornflakes. They would give me different quality. Like the sugar would be very, very fine. And then when I poured like the coarse salt, it would be thicker sound, another layer. So try to blend all this element to make Sandman grow as he's growing in the movie.
We wanted the sand textures from the smallest microscopic sand granule, which is what the first shot starts off with, and then evolves into a fluid sand feeling.
I recorded boulders rolling and we just hitting, and as a shot we start up very, very close on it, and then we start pulling out, so the sound kind of reflected that by coming smaller and smaller into actually sand.
It's all kind of coming together in the shot in streams of sand that then inevitably form, and so we've got the mass of which is heavier, but there's a lot of delicate detail to all of what he is. So it's really from the smallest sand to the biggest boulder and everything in between to give him his sound.
My name is Gary Hecker. I'm the supervising Foley artist on Spider-Man 3. Since I was a kid, I've always liked sound, and I'm from the Midwest, Ohio, and I made my way out here to California to pursue being a Foley artist. We provide a lot of the sound and sound effects, things that weren't picked up on location. We mimic movements, actions, and different sounds to help make the film intense. First and foremost, we always start with the footsteps, so anything that Spider-Man does, his running, his jumping, when he shoots his web and then attaches, when he whooshes, all these different things, we have to come up with different sounds. So I physically have to put myself in Tobey Maguire's, literally in his shoes, and match all the actions. We've used these before on Spider-Man, and what it does, it just looks like an ordinary stick. It creates like a whoosh sound if something's flying. It creates like that, and if the action goes like whoo, whoo, then you just go like that, but you're watching the screen. This stick makes a whoosh sound, right? But then you have different frequencies of whooshes, because if it's a thin little object, this actually makes a high piercing one. Okay, what we have here is, we kind of made these. These are just little leather strips that are cut up with scissors. And you have to get, it's action movie, so you got to get a lot of velocity in it. So if it's attaching, you'll watch the screen or your picture or whatever you're doing, and it goes, you know. And if it hits and flies away, like, and this was used in Spider-Man 3.
What I usually do is I go through and do a dialogue pass, and then I'll back up and do a music pass, and I don't listen to any sound effects at that point.
The actual killer is still at large.
What are you talking about?
This is the man who killed your husband.
And then Greg will go in and listening to the dialogue and the music, do his sound effects pass.
Peter, it's MJ.
These are BGs 1, 2, 3, and 4. Usually all the traffic's on 1, all the airs are on 2. Office interior people wallas are in 3. Then we've got police backgrounds in 4. So that they're separate, yet we still have control over all of them. And then all the effects pre-dubs, we have a total of 17 effects pre-dubs. All the explosions are separate from the trains, separate from all the impacts, all the web shoots, all of the Spidey whooshes are all separated. So this is my kind of roadmap as to where did we put everything, you know. And so when he says, can you lower that metal impact, I know that it's on effects pre-dub 5, and that shows up here. And all of these correlate to these faders in front of me.
Then we go back together and watch the whole reel through, and then kind of decide, hey, maybe we should back off on the sound effects here, raise the music here, or back off on the dialogue here, raise effects here. And then we get together for what's called the final mix, where we're all in the room with the director, the producer, the film editor, the composer usually, and the sound editors, and together we sit and create what you see when you go to the movies. Our biggest challenge in Spider-Man 3 or any action adventure is trying to figure out what to hear at what time during the movie, because you've got these big action scenes going on that have got you know, people screaming or talking or yelling, and then you've got sirens and bullets and car chases going on, and at the same time you've got musical score going on, and if we play them all up here, it's just going to sound like a train wreck. So it's trying to figure out the delicate blend to figure out what you want to hear at what particular moment.
What the sound designer and my editor Bob Morosky try and do is really create a unique experience for the audience. Something that is not just a wall of sound, but something that has absences and that can be very sweet and tiny at times. Something that uses the space, the surrounds, something that can pan from speaker to speaker. Really try and give the audience the full range of sound as far as movement and dynamics.
This movie is an 8-track configuration, meaning that there's a left, center, right. There's 5 speakers across the screen, and then there's stereo surrounds, and then we have our subwoofer track. If a car is driving left to right, in pre-dubbing, we've panned it already, we've equalized it, we've determined the level, but that can change in final mix because I still have control of it right here.
Sam is more connected with the soundtrack of his movies than 90% of the other directors we work with, maybe even 95%. He's so connected. And Sam ultimately becomes a driving force in what he wants to hear at any one moment. He's very open to listening to our suggestions, but he really is the ultimate voice in how that's going to play, and he's very into it. We're all here to do one thing, which is help tell the story. You know, the cinematographer does it with his camera, the art director does it with his set decoration, art decoration, and we do it through the use of sound.
Today we're going to explore ADR, So join me, ADR mixer Howard London, and ADR supervisor Susan Dudek as we loop one of the scenes in Spider-Man 3.
Why we're looping this because there was no sound shot on the day. It was camera only. It was called MOS, which means mit-out sound. So we need to add everything, which is fairly common for action scenes. It's usually because of just sound that's dirty, has a lot of background on it. Camera noise, wind machines, especially in movies with a lot of green screen, stuff like that. There's a lot of machinery going on at the time when the actors are speaking. And if it's over a very specific line of dialogue that they want nice and clean, you go in and you loop it. Let's get smothered. You might want to stick some Kleenex in your mouth.
All right.
Howard, can we get some of those? Did you have those t-shirt pieces? That might be better.
Let me get a razor blade.
You know, what we try to do here is create the physicality, because, just some things can't be faked.
Yeah.
If you were wearing a helmet, I'd give you a plastic cup to yell into to replicate the sound of that. We also put trash cans on people's heads too. When we do a period piece with knights, we literally have different materials, and sometimes it's a trash can, just to replicate that sound. Now, what I'm thinking of is that, because as the sand comes in progressively, you're not at the top of the cut covered with it.
Yeah.
That as you see it covering you, you can just jam it in there.
Oh, so I start out clean and
you start out clean because you start out with a wow and then a big hitting against the glass there. So just stick it in there and then don't worry about it.
Yeah, okay.
And just go.
3007, take one. Should I cut one of those in?
Sure.
Really nice sound.
Yeah, nice sound.
So Susan now has a plethora of vocal expressions to choose from. So now I'm just going to cut that piece, quickly move it. We've always done this, so take a little piece of this, a little piece of that, but now it's faster and I can actually do some nice editorial work and play it back for them.
Hey!
You just got to dig that.
It's really good.
Spider-Man didn't come from Metropolis. He didn't come from Gotham City. He came from New York.
Got it now.
This is New York, the biggest character in the world. And we feel it, and the actors feel it, and Sam feels it, and turn the camera up, and you're in New York. You don't have to fake anything.
The great part about New York is the million different types of people that you'd see on the street, and just a sense of pace in life that no computer could ever capture.
It's its own character in our movie. It's just the energy, the character of the city itself. I mean, it's just so necessary. It's so integrated into the Spider-Man comic books and the movies.
This is where Peter Parker's from. You realize this is where Spider-Man's from. Spider-Man lives 70, 80 stories above the ground. We can't get that in Los Angeles. You can only get it in New York, and you only want to get it in New York.
When I created the character, I wasn't thinking, I'll put him in New York because of the big buildings for the web slinging, but it turned out to be very fortuitous.
How would Spider-Man swing without the skyscrapers? He'd be out of luck in Arizona.
Well, New York is always a character in these movies. In this case, for Peter, it plays a different role because Spider-Man's always been vilified, and this time the New Yorkers love him. And then a lot of his, relationship with Mary Jane gets played out in Central Park and various places around the city.
When you shoot on the streets in New York, you have crowds watching, and there's photographers and people with their video cameras, and things like that.
On the sound stages, there's no audience really, and we come out to New York and everybody's out there watching. And
so just the energy here really helps. I mean, you get real, tangible experiences in real settings and situations. That informs your acting as an actor.
It's a great energy to go out there and work and interact.
I deal with the director, the production designer. They give me sort of their vision of what the locations are supposed to be, and just handle all the logistics of making it happen.
New York itself, we doubled the amount of days of shooting in New York that we did on Spidey 2.
This production is like moving the army overseas. Thousands of people working on it.
The biggest challenge is really logistically getting a film crew on the streets of New York and dealing with the daily activities.
What we're trying to do, any of the street shots that show some expanse, to show the canyons, to show the hustle and bustle of New York City, that's what we're out to achieve. That's why we're shooting in Times Square and some of the other locations on Broadway and 6th Avenue.
It's our first time ever shooting in Times Square for any of the Spider-Man movies, and a little more naturally, more energized. It's good to be here. We are shooting on what's called Military Island. The roads in Times Square kind of form an X, and we're shooting in one of those triangles. So we're a little secluded, but at the same time we lose this location at 11 o'clock. So we're scrambling to get our shots done in this location so we can move on. We get a lot of people pausing, looking by. You know, it's what's great about shooting in New York, but it does add a little extra pressure at the same time.
When we were filming in Times Square, we really had to control the area. A lot of the tourists came out and we had paparazzi, and we just needed to really control the areas where we were working, because that can also slow down the production.
Very, very special guest Stan Lee is here. Every time Stan shoots with us, the crew gets a little more excited. It's just a little boost to have the guy who created all this was Steve Ditko 40 plus years ago. He's the mastermind behind the Marvel Universe, and it's great to have him.
When Spider-Man 3, oh boy, I've got an actual line to say. I think Sam came up with the idea. I mean, obviously, if I had come up with the idea, it would have been more than one line. But Peter Parker is standing in the street looking at a sign, and I walk up to him. You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Then, after a pause, a beat of about 2 seconds, I say, "Enough said." And I look at him again, and I walk away and disappear into the crowd.
At our Key to the City ceremony downtown, we were dealing with over 1,000 people between the two units for the crew, and then all of our background actors.
We're going to be continuing to shoot the Arrival Spider-Man, which we're setting up right now with a Technicrane. It's basically going off Dallas Howard. She announces Spider-Man's arrival. We're going to hinge back and sweep over this crowd as they turn to watch Spider-Man arrive.
This is the moment where he's swinging in. That's what we're celebrating, the moment when he first arrives. Give me everything you've got. And it's also an important moment for another reason. I have hidden cameras on this crowd. You all could be on camera. This is your moment to be a movie star. These are the faces America wants to see.
Then we're going to have coverage of the kiss. Spider-Man's coming in a CG form, and then we're going to see a practical stunt Spidey arrive and kiss Gwen.
Give him a kiss! Give him a kiss! Give him a kiss! Go on! Give him a kiss! Yeah! Yeah!
You have to be very flexible in terms of, our weather has changed. We had to go to cover for the first day of this sequence. Had we arrived, it could have been a disaster.
Weather throws curveball into what we do. It does make things very, very challenging.
It's rained probably, out of 10 days, it's probably rained 7 of those days. Quite frankly, sometimes it's unavoidable, and you have to shoot up into the rain. And in those instances, you try to maybe put up tarps and stuff over the cast and the background performers, and you just deal with it, because you can't not shoot. And so today in the cemetery, we knew that we could deal with the rain. It actually adds to it, because it is somber, it is downcast, it is a funeral. It is Harry's departure from our story. So today was a good thing. It always makes it tougher to work in, and it's a little muddy, and then it's tough to get the cameras in and out. But today was actually, all things considered, better for the story that it rained.
On Spider-Man 2, the Spidey Cam was so effective in creating this dizzying, beautiful background plate that we also used it in Spider-Man 3. We would take the camera and soar it through the city blocks and blocks, dropping some 50 stories at a time, to really give the audience the feeling that they were soaring with Spider-Man.
New York City is pretty amazing. Seeing New York in a different perspective, that's what's exciting about it, because we see New York from above, which really you don't see that often.
You know, our characters fly from, 30, 40, 75 stories up in the air. So in order to achieve that look, we have to get as high as we can.
So it's really getting onto tall buildings where you're going to get sort of a great skyline view of the city.
Once we start with our flying of Spider-Man, which is done with spider cams and wires and cranes and off the tops of buildings, that's where we're different than most other films.
Sometimes it's very simple, where we attach the Spidey Cam run to the building, or we have to create some sort of ballast system by using water barrels. So that's got to be designed, working with their building engineers, our Spidey Cam guys, and coming up with a safe way of doing it.
What we've learned from the first two movies is it's always great to get real footage of New York. So whenever we could, and it was practical, we'd take a Spider Cam rig and get some real good footage. We got into a sort of a little bit of a dirtier world, a little bit of a grittier world. We always have tried on the last movies to get a gritty New York City, but we're like 5 to 10 stories above the ground, typically. In this case, we did get, 1 story to 2 stories above the ground.
There's a great bunch of guys who put cables from one building top to another as much as a half mile, 3/4 mile apart, and we fly the camera right through the city. The camera will go from 700 feet in the air to 4 feet off the ground and back up.
The Spider Cam is a whole system of winches and camera carriers, and computers and software. It's really just sort of a blanket name we give to all these little tools that let us fly the camera around and move cameras and stunt people around. Right now we're doing a couple of descender shots off the corner of the building and down about 600 and some feet off the edge of the building. We have a couple of fairly big winches. Right now we're running a 30 horsepower winch to basically do the acceleration at the top and braking at the bottom.
So basically what it is, we got a weight over here and a weight over there that's lower, and they're hooked together in a big system like this. And then right in the center is this winch here, which is just a big, big friction shift. It basically just pulls the line one way. So this is down, it just pulls it up, and this helps it pull it up, and then the other way around. So the winch isn't seeing a lot of work. It's just its whole job is just to go fast, and then gravity's actually doing all the work for us.
The final battle sequence, the construction site location downtown, which was Chase Plaza, all the surrounding buildings down there. We used photogrammetry that were just photographed and then digitally input into the film.
We strung a camera past that building off a series of skyscrapers and dropped a camera right down the side of that and took pan and tile photographs, 360 photographs, and that allowed us to create and use pan and tiles for a lot of the backgrounds, so we don't have to light and render all these buildings for every single shot.
We're here at Chase Plaza. We, as you can see, we got Spider Cam up, finally. Due to the rain and lightning and thunder, it's the first time we've been able to get it going, and we're gonna do some drops from about 500 feet up, a couple descender rigs, looking down, looking sideways, and then we'll change the rig around and look up. That's about our day's work.
This rig, we actually have a line between the building we're on and another building farther out, so we actually stretch across buildings. And we have a rig that goes all the way out and then down, up and down, so we can do descender shots and back and forth out in the plaza. It took us about a day to do it originally, and then we got rained out and lightninged out 2 nights in a row. Being out in the middle of an open plaza, especially on such a foul weather time, but definitely with wind issues, and we gotta make sure our winches get covered. And if the water gets in the winches, then we can have problems with that. Just the electronics, obviously, are water sensitive. Not to mention our line changes weight when it collects water, and so that changes our calculations a little bit. That's what we're doing. So these are all things we have to take into account.
We're in front of the New York Public Library for day 110 of 110 days of first unit photography on Spider-Man 3. This is it, and it's a little festive being the last day.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've all put in a great deal of swell work in this picture, and it was a great pleasure for me to work with you, and I give you my sincere and heartfelt thanks. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap.
You can't beat filming in the city. There's just a vibe here you get. There's a natural production value you get that you can't, no matter how well you cheat Los Angeles for New York, you can't create New York. It's one of the greatest cities in the world.
The great part about New York is the tremendous amount of vibrant life that it brings to the picture.
It throws me off guard a little bit to have so much other energy projecting on you.
There is a pace, a feel. The audience know that they're really in New York.
I love it. I mean, I love going to New York.
It's like another movie almost here in New York.
Cleveland actually turned out to be a great place to shoot. We had a very challenging, large, car sequence with a full-size runaway armored car. At 35 miles an hour, it hits, 2 or 3 cars and doesn't slow down a mile an hour. It keeps going. These cars are punched down the street, up on the sidewalks. Nothing stops this armored car.
Because our second unit stunt team had to so own the streets, there was no way a city of New York size could give us the streets with that much latitude for the long amount of time that we need.
Cleveland was very happy to have us come in, take 7 blocks of their downtown area, and recreate New York, and it worked wonderfully.
It's really not feasible to control a street like this in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Most major cities completely rejected the idea.
We're on Euclid Avenue. Euclid Avenue is one of the major east-west thoroughfares going through downtown Cleveland. It was built in roughly the same era as a lot of New York City, so a lot of the architecture is pretty comparable. We only have about 400,000 some people in the city, and so we're much less trafficked than a place like New York or Chicago. In order for Dan Bradley to do his precision driving work, they really needed a smooth surface, and so Mayor Jackson agreed to repave most of Euclid Avenue so that the production could get what it needed in terms of road smoothness.
I think in Cleveland we destroyed 18 different cars. They were all parked cars, and each car that we hit along the curb I wanted to have a slightly different interaction. So we rid cars. One we called the helicopter car. And it's a car that, when the armored car clips it, it pushes it up into a station wagon parked in front of it, and as it drives by, it catches the rear end of it and causes it to spin and wind up in the street behind the armored car.
Nick, yes, sir. Let's make sure that we have nothing but sedans in the oncoming traffic. I'm flying the arm over.
Nothing but small cars, copy that.
Okay.
Hey, buddy.
Going out to 25 miles an hour.
We were using a car that was designed to encase the cameras in steel so that we could drive into other vehicles without crushing the cameras. So it was sort of a mobile camera safe.
My name's Tim Rigby, and I'm driving this camera vehicle to a near miss with the garbage truck here. I'm going to start about 300 feet back, get up to 40 miles an hour, and then back from that there's a deceleration, a series of lines that are going to break in progressive lengths to slowly decelerate me to the end mark.
The rope decelerator it's a pretty simple idea. Our car at 40 miles an hour weighed about 115,000 pounds. So that's a lot of weight. Each rope I used takes 4,000 pounds of energy to break. So it's really simple subtraction. Every rope is 4,000 pounds, times that by 20 ropes, and then suddenly you have 80,000 pounds of deceleration. So every time a rope breaks, you're taking away that much energy.
I think the last rope and the last cable might be close to the same length.
They are.
Maybe.
The rope's 20 feet, the cable's 22.
Uh-huh.
So I'm sure the stretch in the rope.
Uh-huh.
First part of the gag worked amazingly well. You see the armored car slam into the side of a garbage truck, and suddenly the rear end pops up in the air. It was a good 15 feet in the air, and the car was on the verge of flipping over on its side, and the tiller arm, it's like a tiller on a boat, steering the car, the arm bent, so the car literally steered out from rolling over. It was impossible and disappointing all in the same breath.
Our goal in that shot was for it to land on its side, and it's a little unpredictable. The cannons came off the ground before they fired, so we didn't get a full stroke. But what we're going to do is put it in its matched position that it left its last good frame out of, and use another truck just to pull it sideways.
Sort of thinking on the fly, I looked at the shots I had and said, well, you know, we have to finish this today. I don't have any time to try it again. So I decided that I could prop the car up in the last attitude we saw it in several shots where it was, you know, on its front end, and then simply pull it over. So, you know, we quickly propped the car up so that the rear end was, you know, 12 feet higher than the front end, and used a cable attached to two semi-trucks like a pair of horses. And suddenly they took off, and it jerks the car off the stands, and it winds up on its roof.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Cleveland Police Department, thank you. Thank you. And to the crew, Spider-Man, thank you for a great hard week.